Before we begin, a quick but important note. This episode contains discussions of suicide, which may be distressing for some listeners. Please be aware of your own well-being. If you or someone you know is struggling, please know that help is available. Reach out to friends, family, or professionals. You are not alone. In the United States, you can call or text the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988 for free, confidential support 24/7. Please take care while listening. Listener discretion is advised. Remember, it's okay to pause or stop if you need to.
Do you have a loved one who went missing or was murdered while traveling abroad? Is your family still searching for answers? At the Last Trip Podcast, we believe these stories deserve to be heard. We want to amplify your voice, share your loved one's story, and help bring awareness to their case. If you are a family member or friend of someone who vanished or lost their life while traveling, we want to hear from you. Your story could help spark new leads, keep their memory alive, and push for the justice they deserve. Reach out to us at thelasttrippodcast@gmail.com or DM us on Instagram at thelasttripcrimepod to share your story. Together, we can shine a light where it's needed most. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. If you haven't already done so, please make sure the volume of this podcast is set perfectly to your listening enjoyment. Please take your seat, whether that's on the treadmill, car, sofa, or bed, and buckle in for the last trip. My name is Jamie Beebe, and I'll be your tour guide, recreating someone's last days in paradise. On behalf of myself and everyone behind the scenes, please enjoy the Last Trip Podcast. And because nobody likes a long flight to get to where they want to be, let's prepare for takeoff. On August 21st, 2024, we released episode 41, The Case of Ryan Roth. In that episode, I walked you through the timeline of events and shared the details investigators made to the public. In this episode, I'm joined by Ryan's uncle, Sean Flynn, as we take a deeper look at who Ryan was before his alleged suicide, why Sean is searching for him, any new updates in the case, and where Ryan might be now. Ryan Roth, born Ryan Flynn, vanished on January 20th, 2020, from a cliff in Bali, Indonesia. The 39-year-old, originally from England, left behind a passport, driver's license, a suicide note, and other personal belongings. But he also left behind a legacy of deception, dishonesty, and schemes. Many people, including the Indonesian authorities, suspect Ryan staged his disappearance to mimic a suicide and is instead in hiding, taking with him millions of dollars he swindled from friends and family through fraudulent business schemes. Hi, Sean. Thank you so much for joining me on The Last Trip.
Hi, Jamie. Thanks very much for inviting me along. My name's Sean Flynn, and I am Ryan Roth's uncle. So I've known him from a very young age.
What was Ryan like as a kid? I talked a little bit about it in the first episode, but what's your take on Ryan as a child?
I always remember him just being very demanding. He was very arrogant. I remember many times when I'd be at his mother's house and Ryan would come home from school, he'd just walk through the back door and he'd just start shouting and demanding, what's for dinner? I want this, I want that. And just the way he was all the time, it's like he just wanted everybody just to wait on him and do anything that he wanted them to. And he just had a way with manipulating people, even just from a very young age. And then progressively, he just got worse and worse and worse, and just turned into this person that I'm searching for all these years.
The way Ryan tells the story about his childhood is that he was just this entrepreneur from a young age, and he was always making money and having these great deals, and he's just so intelligent. Does any of that ring true?
Not much of it. Yeah, I would say that he is quite intelligent. He did claim to be studying psychology and law at the University of Southampton. And he actually went around calling himself Dr. Ryan Flynn and then Dr. Ryan Roth. And I spoke to a good friend of mine. He's a retired magistrate. And he had a few of his lawyer friends look into Ryan. They all said that Ryan's such a very slippery character. It's very difficult to pin anything on him. And then he contacted the university and they can't find any record of Ryan ever attending there. Ryan did come out a bit later on and claim that he'd left with the option to complete his university degrees, but they can't find him being there at all. So it's just something he's just made up to make himself look a lot better than he actually was. And I know in the book, I've got it here somewhere, it's called A Journey of Riches. It's a series of books by John Spender. And I was doing a Google search for Ryan one day, like I do, and I came across this book cover. And one of the authors, there's many authors, about 12 authors that write chapters for these books, and one of the pictures was Ryan. So I immediately downloaded a copy of the book, and Ryan's chapter is called Taking Responsibility. It's only about a 30-minute read, but 99% of it is just sheer lies and Ryan talking about himself and the way he likes to inflate what he does. Just thinking of a couple of the things in the book was he starts off, he says from a very young age, he set his first company up aged 11 in logistics and distribution. I mentioned this in the documentary that he's actually referring to a paper round that he had. He used to get newspapers from the local newsagent, get other kids to deliver them for him, didn't pay them as much money as the newsagent would, and then he would keep the difference. So he was just looking to get as much money as he could from a young age by doing as little as possible. And then other stories in the book, he brags about his father, who's one of the Irish gypsy travellers. His father wanted to leave him his multinational company. Ryan decided that he didn't want his multinational company. He wanted to go off and do some good around the world. I know that the multinational company, there's probably a market stall somewhere in one of the towns in London. There's no company involved, and if somebody had offered me a big company like that, I would have just taken it and used all the profits for doing good causes. It's just the way Ryan just wants people to think that he's a lot better and he's from a wealthy background and things like that. It's just all an illusion and just an impression that he wants to give people so that they believe him and trust him.
Do you like history, but want to learn something new?
You mean something old? Like pre-1900s old?
Yeah, that.
Remember the episode about murder?
Which one? There were a lot of them.
Or all the forgotten women in history that are actually pretty awesome.
How about all those cannibalism episodes?
No.
If any of this has sparked your interest, then you should join us every Wednesday for new episodes of Olde Crime.
It's the show where Lindsay and I discuss funny, strange, and obscure crimes with some paranormal stuff sprinkled in. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And we'll see you next time with another tale
as old as crime.
Was there a point that you lost contact with Ryan? What were his older years like when he started becoming an adult?
I sort of lost touch with Ryan probably for a little while when he was around 14, 15 years old. I actually moved away from the area, so I didn't see so much of him. I used to go and visit my sister Sheena, that's Ryan's mother, probably every couple of weeks, and sometimes Ryan would be there, sometimes he wouldn't. But he always had this attitude. He was always busy trying to do something. He'd never let on. He always had these big ambitions that he wanted to be a marine biologist or an astronaut, a tennis coach, purely because of the lifestyle. It seemed like it would be very glamorous. He could meet wealthy people. He was always full of dreams, but he never actually sort of did anything with them. So I didn't see too much of him. Must have been quite a few years since I saw him again, just at Christmas gatherings with the family and things like that.
When was it and how was it that you discovered he was taking money from family members?
I found out that he'd taken virtually all my mother's money. It'd be about 14 years ago now. I knew my mother had around £20,000. Don't know what that converts to, maybe around $25,000 from the sale of a house that she had with her late husband. She came over to visit me over in Cyprus once, and she was really struggling for money. And I just wanted to know why, because I thought she had all this money behind her. And then she told me, like I said, about 14 years ago, that she'd lent Ryan around about £18,000 for various different business ventures that Ryan was getting involved with. First of all, it was a charity event in London. There's going to be a lot of big names, big celebrities there. It was all for good causes. So she lent him £5,000. That didn't go ahead. And then a few weeks later, there was something else that he was arranging. He wanted another £5,000. And then she sent over £3,000 to, when he was in France, he was doing something with rescuing dogs, setting up a dog sanctuary. So she sent him £3,000. I still have the receipt for that. Because I noticed on the receipt that right at the last moment when she transferred the money, Ryan's name was crossed out and someone else's name was put in. So he was getting somebody else to pick the money up for him, so it couldn't be traced back to him. Then there was another £5,000 for something else, and that's virtually all she had. And that's when I first started looking into what he'd been doing. I didn't realize the scale of things then. I thought it was just my mother. And then my mother told me about money that she'd given to her daughter, Sheena, just to help her out, like I say, from the sale of this house that she had. I think she gave Sheena about £5,000. Ryan found out about it and managed to con Sheena out of all of it. And then I just gradually started doing some searches on the internet. I tried contacting Ryan, asking him about payment plans that he was going to make. And then he just kept denying it. He said, I don't owe her that money. She's got to prove it. Because it's been going on for so long, banks don't keep records of checks and things like that after 7 years. And if she wanted to go to a small claims court because of the timescale involved, then they probably wouldn't be interested. That's what Ryan does. He does a lot of research and he finds out these things. And he knew that after so long, she wouldn't be able to do anything. And sadly, the only witness that my mother gave him this money was Sheena, Ryan's mother, who had passed away. So it's just his grandmother's word against him at the end of the day. And there was no proof. So she was never going to get anything. And then following some internet searches, I found out he'd been setting up various companies in the UK and in America. And I just came across one little story from the New Filmmakers of LA. He'd set up this company offering to do movies for people on the cheap. And somebody had made a post about they'd given him $1,200 to make this movie and he hadn't delivered and they couldn't get the money back out of him. And then slowly I sort of just started building up a trail across the globe of different things that he'd done.
What was it like finding out that he owed so much money to so many people and he'd been conning all these people? There's a lot of people out there that Ryan took money from.
I'm totally amazed because had Ryan paid my mother back the money, then I probably wouldn't have even started looking into him. It would have been that simple. But then as I started tracking him around the world, well, I knew about the dog sanctuary in France, and then I got in touch with his ex-girlfriend in America, Karen Beck, also known as DJ Shy. She messaged me back saying I think she gave somebody else about nearly $4,000 that Ryan owed them in back rent. She was never going to get it back. That's when a guy called David Baker, who's in the documentary, he's a researcher and he's based in Australia. And he knew this lady who had rented Ryan an apartment. And basically Ryan's he's just so full of so many claims in America that he's done this and he's done that. I've got a list of things that he claims, which are all just total lies. And then Karen told me that the IRS and Homeland Security had been in touch with her because of her involvement with Ryan. And that's when Ryan left the country, went over to Japan. In the meantime, he'd been to New Zealand, and I know of 2 different scams in Australia. The Australian police have an active warrant out for his arrest. He left the country before they could question him. And then I just kept coming up with different companies. I was looking into Kickstarter, and he started a company on there called Malala Coffee, where he got about $700,000 investment from that before he left a suicide note in Thailand. Popped over to Israel for a couple of days and then went over to Bali. And in the meantime, there's about 20 other companies that he's set up, fake charities, tried to put an end to child sex trafficking. That was one of his big ones. All the money from that went into his own private PayPal account. He's been questioned by the police in America numerous times over allegations of fraud for couch surfing. He got banned from the couch surfing website because housemates were finding their belongings and electronics were disappearing, and for some reason they would turn up in Ryan's room. The police questioned him but never prosecuted him. Another time, his car was being towed away, and his girlfriend asked why it was being towed away, and she was told that it had been reported as being stolen because it was a hire car and Ryan hadn't returned it. The list just goes on and on and on, and I could just sit here all night talking about all the different scams he's been involved with. But when David Baker got involved and did his research on Ryan, and he was doing another YouTube show on Ryan, and he was writing the script for this story that was going to come out, he'd just done so much research, and that's when he came up with the figure between $7 and $12 million. And he said that's very conservative. There's hundreds of investors all around the world. The problem is everybody thinks that it's just them that's been scammed, so they don't file a police report. And especially with Carbu in Bali, a lot of the investors there were hundreds of them. Some of them only lost $10,000 or $20,000, but quite a few lost $50,000, $100,000, some even $200,000. But they're very famous people. They're well-known actors, actresses, they're government ministers and officials, and they won't come forward because they're worried about their reputations. They don't want people to know that they've been scammed. So nobody's actually doing anything about it, and the Bali police wouldn't look into it. So at the moment, it's only the Australian police that have got the warrant out for him. The UK Serious Fraud Office, they're not interested because most of the scams that he's done have been all across the globe and not really in the UK. So it's just trying to find somebody that's willing to take the next step.
Why do you think Ryan is such a good con man? People are giving him money right and left. Why do you think he's able to do this?
I believe he's able to do it partly because of his background. Like I said before, his father was one of the Irish gypsy travellers. And being Irish, they've got the gift of the gab. They can talk the hind legs off a donkey. They're so convincing. And Ryan is exactly like that. Quite a few people have described him as a narcissistic psychopath. I had to Google that. And in the documentary, there's a guy called Michael from Rexfield Cyber Security. They were actually hired to look into Ryan's online presence after he disappeared. He described what a narcissistic psychopath is, and he'd never met Ryan, and it just described Ryan 100% from an early age, exactly what he was like. And other people have said exactly the same. Because he's a good-looking guy, he's quite tall, he likes the young Asian women. They sort of fall for the charm, the good looks, and he believes everything that he says to people. He genuinely believes what he's saying is right. So if you believe it yourself, then other people are more likely to believe you.
There's been a lot of amazing conners throughout the world. Do you think that Ryan is up at the top of that list? Ted Bundy was charming. He was a con artist. There's a lot of them out there. Do you think Ryan's up at the top?
I would say he's up close with them. He's got to be in the top 5. He's very convincing. Some of the con artists, they have their own sort of style. Ryan's one that likes to stand up in front of people. He wants to be noticed. He wants people to look at him. He's just so convincing. And anybody that doesn't agree with what he's saying, he will shout them down. Just one little example, on the day of his mother's funeral, and that was the last time I saw him, Ryan was told not to go into Sheena's house until the rest of the family had arrived. And when we got there, Ryan was already inside the house and he found a big stack of paperwork belonging to Sheena. He was just trying to go through everything he could find to see if Sheena had any money stashed away, which she didn't. She sort of lived from week to week. She never had anything, but she was happy. She was very hardworking. And on the day, because I didn't want to cause a scene or anything like that, I walked in with my mother and all I said was, "Good morning, Ryan." And he just hit the roof. He just started shouting and swearing and he wouldn't shut up. That was the last time I ever spoke to him. I was trying to be polite because of the day it was. And you say one wrong thing to Ryan and he will just completely freak out and shout at you, swear at you until you back down and he gets his own way.
When did you find out that Ryan had allegedly jumped off of this cliff in Bali?
I found out about his second alleged suicide. I'll tell you about the first one in a minute. Again, I was just still looking into him because of the money that he owed my mother. And then I just came across this story, which was printed in the Daily Mail in the UK, about a British guy falls from the top of a cliff in Bali. And I couldn't believe it when I read the name, Ryan Roth. I thought, I have to look into this a bit more. And I read the story, and then I got in touch with the Daily Mail and said, it's a great story, but here's the truth about Ryan and what he's been up to and what he's been doing. And they printed another story a couple of weeks later, basically saying that he was a global con man, scamming people from millions all over the world. And that's when I came across the story. Unfortunately, I'm not sure the exact date. I think it's around about the 20th of January, 21st of January, that they found his things at the top of the cliff. It was right before COVID started. And that's another reason I believe why he's been able to stay hidden for so long, because for a couple of years, people were walking around with masks on. You could stand next to your next door neighbor and they're wearing a mask and you probably wouldn't recognize them. And if Ryan cuts his hair short or grows it long, grows a beard, it'd be very easy for him just to stay hidden, just in plain sight. That's why I think he's managed to sort of stay in hiding for so long, because of where I think he is. There's not many people around that are going to know who he is or have the sort of internet access that we have in these countries.
Did you immediately think that this was not a real suicide? And what were your clues? Was it just because he's tried it before?
I didn't think for 1 second that it was a genuine suicide, because I'd read another story on another website. There's a website dedicated to Ryan. It's called A Scam a Day. And they'd actually printed a suicide note that Ryan left in Thailand about 3 years earlier. So what happened in Thailand was Ryan had another coffee company called Malala Coffee. Got a lot of investment from that. Like I said before, he likes the young Asian women. Quite a few of them, they have wealthy families, wealthy parents. So Ryan gets on their good side. He gets to move in with them. He promises them marriage and kids. Then he comes up with, I need some money for this investment. Would your parents be interested? He takes money from them, builds up his little nest egg, and then leaves a suicide note and disappears somewhere else and starts again. That was his first suicide note. I just kept following the story, which then took him to Bali. Then that was the big one, which we're not sure how much he actually got away with in Bali. We know it was at least 5 million. The lady, Pippa, in the documentary, she knew Ryan quite well. She said that he had 4 passports in different names. And she knew that Carbu had been funded to well over 5 million. And that's all the initial investment that was needed for the company. But she couldn't understand why Ryan was so desperate to keep getting more and more investment. It was because he had his exit plan. He knew 5 million was enough, but if he could get another few million, then all the better. That's when he got involved with, I can't say the mafia word, but some unscrupulous people in Bali. He was introduced to them. He offered to raise money for their investments. Ryan got a lot of money from people for whatever investments they were, but then Ryan didn't give them the money. They were after him, and then 3 days later, there was his suicide note at the top of the cliff, which then coincided with a copy of a flight ticket I was sent, which had Ryan flying out of Bali on the same day that his things were discovered at the top of the cliff. If the Bali police had done their job and looked at the airports, even afterwards, they would have been able to check the flight manifest to prove whether or not he was on the flight, but they never did. So that's really the missing piece of information that I need, is if somebody can access the manifest just to prove it 100%. But everybody I've spoken to around the world, they all say the same thing. It was definitely a fake suicide. Even when I was in Bali and I was meeting with the actual search and recovery team that actually went over the cliff there, they said to me, it's not in the documentary, but they had actually said to me that it was definitely fake because of the location of the cliffs, and they're not vertical cliffs, they're a steep angle, and they're just covered in trees and bushes. Had he jumped from the top of there, he wouldn't have been able to reach the sea. He would have just been stuck in one of the trees, and they would have quite easily found him or found a body. In a hot country, even if they didn't find the body within 2 weeks, there would have been the smell of a decomposing body, which would have alerted people. And there was no signs of any disturbance in the trees and the bushes, no broken branches or anything like that. So they're 100% convinced that it was fake.
I know you've been there and you've seen it. I've been to Bali. I've been to that area. I've seen that cliff. And You can't jump into the water from that cliff. It's just not possible. It's so obvious. He should have at least picked a better cliff.
Well, that's what I thought.
He would have just kind of rolled a little way.
He didn't pick the location right. Yeah, he didn't plan. It's a great planner, but he just didn't plan that. Had he done it at the top of a vertical cliff, then maybe people could have thought that, yeah, he could have done it. But then you've got the flight ticket out of Bali on the same day. So that's one of the giveaways, I think. And the fact that he'd done it before. I know of 3 attempted suicides as well. 1 in America and 2 in England. He's just doing it for attention. He's not trying to kill himself. He just wants people talking about him.
How has this become your mission? Because you are on a train, you are headed to find him. How has this taken over your life?
I've been on a mission now for years trying to find him and actually track him down. I try not to let it take over my life. I do like to spend some time, several times a week, just doing a bit of internet research to see if I can find any other keywords and things like that I haven't put in that might bring up new information about him. I've tried not to let it take over too much. Sometimes I just let it die off for a few weeks and then I jump back on the case again to see if there's any new information, because things keep popping up. People keep contacting me with different stories. There's so many that I don't know about. I had an email last week from a guy. He had a photography company selling very high-end cameras, and Ryan had approached him a few years ago asking if he would send him one of the top-of-the-range cameras, because Ryan was an influencer and he could try and get people to buy it from him. But the guy realized straight away it was a scam and didn't fall for that. And so many other people have come forward with different stories that I just didn't know about. People that used to work with him many years ago. Somebody put a message on the YouTube documentary. They used to work with him in a place called TGI Fridays in Southampton. And Ryan was always trying to get people to give him money for different investments and companies that he was trying to set up. And then when that didn't work, a few weeks later, Ryan would go up to these people and say, "When are you going to give me back the money that I lent you?" And then they'd all just turn around and say, "We didn't lend you any money. What are you talking about?" He was just trying to find any ways that he could just to get money from people. And he's trying to convince them that he'd lent them money when they hadn't.
What makes you so sure that Ryan is alive? Are you on the trail? Have you found certain clues? Is there anything that you can share with us that's happened recently that makes you think, I'm getting closer, I'm getting closer?
Since the documentary went out, there's been a number of people that have been in touch. Some people are saying that he's in this country or that country. But then there seems to be a few people that are saying that he's in the same country. I don't want to say where it is at the moment, because if Ryan's listening to this and he thinks that I know exactly where he is, then he's just going to disappear. So I just want to keep that a little bit quiet. But a couple of them are actually getting in touch with friends of theirs over there to see if they can find out any more information about him. One woman thinks she saw him 2 or 3 times at this place. And then other people have also said that he's in this sort of area. So I'm just keeping my fingers crossed. Somebody even sent me a photograph of somebody. They said, "Is this Ryan?" And although there was a resemblance to him, I really wanted it to be Ryan, but looking closely, it wasn't. But there was a striking resemblance there. So people are looking out for him and they're getting on the case and they really want me to find him. Everyone's just being so helpful and supportive. I just can't thank them enough. But I'm just very limited with my time and what I can do on the internet. It just needs like an internet detective just to get on board with it and see what clues they can find out from different searches that they may be able to do that I can't.
From everything that I've researched and read and talking to you, I think he's probably out there. I think he also probably Googles himself. He probably watches all of the podcasts and he probably seen the documentary that you made about him. I think that he's really into himself and probably has some enjoyment from this. If Ryan is listening right now, what would you say to him?
If Ryan's listening right now, I would say, "Ryan, I'm coming to get you. The world isn't big enough for you to hide in. I'm going to find you and you know it. I've been doing this for years. I'm getting closer. Every week, more and more information is coming out about you. You can't hide. I know you're a control freak. I have proof on Facebook when I messaged you on your Roth management account and you saw it 30 minutes later. And on your Ryan Roth art page, I messaged you on that and you saw it 30 minutes later. You're not going to give control to anybody else. You're not going to let anybody else get on your Facebook pages. You're not going to give them the access passwords that are needed. So I know it's you. And also, you changed your picture on the Facebook page. You updated it 2 years after you allegedly jumped off the cliff. Come and explain that one to me.
Throughout all of this, you've made a documentary, which we've kind of talked a little bit about. Tell me more about what that was like, making the documentary, where people can find it and see it, because there's so much more information that you have that it would take us days to cover.
I had an amazing time making the documentary. It was due to be released on TV, but for some reason it didn't actually go out. I was flown over to London to do some filming for it. Because of all the information that I had on Ryan and his connection to Bali, I actually then got flown out to Bali to do a week's filming out there. That's where I was taken around to the actual place at the top of the cliff. And I was fortunate enough to be sent a copy of the documentary that was fully finished. Unfortunately, the production company actually went bankrupt shortly afterwards. So that's when I decided to upload it to my YouTube channel. The documentary is called The Faking Dead, Ryan Roth. And I can't believe how popular it's become. I was a small YouTube channel, had 120 subscribers. Most of my videos were on scuba diving. When I take my customers scuba diving, I do a little video for them and put it on YouTube so they can watch it. And I get 40 or 50 views, which is great. Then I put the documentary on YouTube, and in the last month, it's had 220,000 views. And I've jumped from 120 subscribers to nearly 2,500 subscribers. There's just been hundreds and hundreds of comments, which have 99% of them have just been so positive, rooting for me to find Ryan. And so many people are just so sorry for what he did to his mother and his grandmother. I'm just blown away by the interest in it. Being over in Bali, that's when I had the opportunity to meet the search and recovery team. I then found out after the filming had stopped that one of the search and recovery team spoke to us and said that his uncle had actually been scammed by Ryan. Then I got taken to the cliff, and I was fortunate enough, they hired a dive boat for me. I went scuba diving to see if I could actually look in any other places that the search and recovery team weren't able to go to, just to see if I could find anything. But it's so far away from the actual cliff itself because of the angle of the cliff that there's just no way that he would have been in the water anywhere. I had a great time there. I found the people of Bali, they're so nice and genuine and helpful and trusting of people. And that's where Ryan came along and just took advantage. He'd done his research, he knew what they were like, and he knew he could tell them whatever he wanted. Because he's so convincing, they would just believe him. And he took so much advantage of their good nature. They're such wonderful people over there. It's such a beautiful island. I wish I'd spent more time there, but the filming was on a tight time scale. Such a wonderful, magical place, and I really hope I get to go back there again.
If you find Ryan, what is your plan? He only has one warrant out in Australia. The police aren't necessarily searching for him for all these other times he's stolen money. What's your plan?
I've often thought what I would do if I actually found him. My main aim has always been to make people aware of what he's done, to get him found, to stop him from doing it to other people, to stop him from taking advantage of vulnerable people that just trust and believe him. But if I did manage to come across him, I know that there'd be a TV company that would fly me straight out so I could confront him. But also I want to get the authorities involved, because faking your own death is not normally a crime, but it is a crime if you do it to get away from your debts. If you owe people money and you disappear by faking your death, then that is a criminal offence. And if I can prove that he's still alive, then at least, the Bali police would then open the investigation. They haven't closed it. They've always said it will stay open until they find him. But if I can point them in the right direction, and the Australian police and whatever country he is in, I'm sure he's been up to some scams there as well, which I'll find out about. I just need people to keep giving me more and more information so I can sort of piece things together and follow up any leads that I do get. I just want to stop him because he's caused so much pain and heartache to so many women around the world mainly, There's been men as well, but mostly women. They're the ones he targets. They just believe his lies all the time, and he can't keep getting away with it.
And you touched on it a little bit, but I was going to ask, do you think that faking his suicide, he turned over a new leaf and he's just living this nice, wonderful life off the money he stole? Or do you think he's still conning people, still trying to get that extra dollar, still greedy, still the same person?
Yeah, I believe he's still doing his scams. I think he's probably being a bit more careful about being too much in the spotlight, because obviously the way the internet is now, being able to search for people just using photographs and things like that, he probably is keeping a lower profile, but I think he's going to be more internet based, probably doing more internet scams. He did one some years ago to do with Bitcoin. There was a company called Leoncy that he was involved with. I haven't found out much about that. There's only short pieces on the internet about that company, but Ryan was involved with it. Maybe it was the early days of Bitcoin then, so he didn't sort of follow it up much. I wouldn't put it past him if he decided to go down that route again. So he can do things from a quiet island somewhere. He can enjoy his life. He's got his millions. He can have whatever he wants and just work off his internet, keep away from the public eye for now. But he won't be able to do it for long. He likes to be noticed. He likes to be seen. And now it's a few years down the line. Maybe he's changed his features a little bit. Could have longer hair, beard. People wouldn't recognize him so easily. But it's the eyes. The eyes will give him away all the time. I recognize them every day of the week.
Awareness is the key. You out there talking about it every day. People listening to this podcast, you've done a couple other podcasts, you have the documentary. What if someone thinks they see Ryan or they know something about him or they've been conned from him? Where can they go? How can they get a hold of you? Should they go to the police? What's the next step for somebody that has seen or knows about Ryan?
I actually set up an email address so that anybody that's got any information, leads, if they've seen him, if they've got any stories about scams that I don't know about yet that I can follow up on, I set up the email address called catchryan@hotmail.com. So catchryan@hotmail.com. Anything that people send through on that email address comes straight through to me. It won't go to anybody else. It's for my eyes only. And I wouldn't do anything with the information, stories that people tell me without their permission. So it's in complete confidence. If I was going to use part of the information, I would get their permission for it first. I would change their names if they didn't want me to mention their names. Because sometimes stories, even if you change someone's names, it can be led back to that person because of the events of the story. So I can change events and things like that if they know of anything that they want to tell me that they don't want to be made too general for the public to hear about. But any bit of information, any photograph, that would be the great thing. It would be a recent photograph of him somewhere doing something. That'd be something I'd really look forward to seeing.
I think he's out there. I think it's just a matter of time for it to seep into whatever corner of the world he's currently at, where people will recognize him and realize who he is. He'll do another bad deal. Someone will reach out.
Everyone I've spoken to, I haven't come across one person that thinks he did it. He loves his life too much. I think it's more of a game to him. It's not always about the money. I think he's just Ryan trying to see if he can actually do it and get away with it. I think that's what it's about to Ryan. Not always about the money. That's a bonus. He's definitely still out there doing something. I just don't know what at the moment. I'm sure somebody's going to come forward and give me some more information once they hear this podcast.
A lot of people have tried to fake their own suicide. Some people have gotten away with it and come back years and years later. A lot of people don't get away with it. But I think this is one of those cases where he's gotten away with it so far, but he's not going to get away with it forever.
He can't get away with it forever. And the more I can get this story out there, the more people can watch the documentary and listen to the podcasts like this and share it around their friends. And it'll go all around the world. It'll reach every small corner of the globe. And then somebody somewhere will say, yeah, I know that guy. He's in the house next door to me. It's just going to be as simple as that. You just need more and more people just to spread this around and get talking about him and do their own research on him. Don't just take my word for what he's been doing. I've got it from so many people. I've got so much information. I've got a box of paperwork just on Ryan and stories and emails and different bits and pieces that I've come across. And I would just keep gathering information for as long as it takes until I can track him down. That's going to be fun if I find out exactly where he is and I can get a film crew with me when I confront him. I just love to see the look on his face.
Me too. When you find him and confront him, and I hope that everybody that has been conned by him comes forward all at once and he spends the rest of his time then in prison. That would be great.
Yeah, that's going to be a great day. I just imagine walking up behind him, tapping him on his shoulder, and he turns around and sees me. I think he'll just run. I think the first thing he'll do is just run as fast as he can.
Sean, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. There's a lot that we have not covered, but I want to direct people over to your documentary because there's a lot of information on there. And I'll put in the show notes where to find your documentary and the email in case they have any information. Let's find Ryan. I wish you the best of luck in finding this con man.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. And yeah, there's just so much. I could talk about Ryan all day long. There's so many things that I've not said tonight. I could say so many stories and tales. You wouldn't believe some of them. Even I don't believe some of them, but he's going to get found one day.
And finally, remember to leave a review and rate this podcast 5 stars if you like the show, or hell, even if you don't. But either way, feel free to let me know what you think. Please follow The Last Trip on Instagram at The Last Trip Crime Pod and subscribe on Patreon to support the show. You'll get extra research, videos, photos, and updates, and even learn more about my personal travels. That's patreon.com/The Last Trip Podcast. I'm Jamie Beebe, bringing you your last trip and signing off until the next one. Thanks for listening.